Welcome back to another episode of Bisrat for Africa. We are a channel that seeks to clarify misconceptions about Christianity, but at the same time, we're also asking questions of other people's beliefs. This is basically a platform where people can have comparative religion dialogue. This will improve our understanding of what we believe and why we believe whatever it is that we believe in. And so, this is not a channel that seeks to sinfully judge people or attack people, but really what we're doing is engaging each other in philosophical discussion. And I don't think this is something that should be a problem for anyone. We're just learning together. We're hearing both sides of the story. So today we are going to look at a video from Dr. Khanyisile Shabalala Litchfield, and she was being interviewed. I think this is a channel in Kenya, and she's talking about African spirituality and Christianity. Now, in this particular video, she's obviously communicating the differences in African spirituality, where there's a side that focuses on nature, but there's also a side that tends to focus now on, the prosperity, the ones that want to do whatever it takes for them to become rich, bewitching people and all those things. So basically, she's distancing herself from all those sort of things. So we're going to look at this video and really engage on these ideas. Has African spirituality been bastardized? In other words, has it been distorted somewhere along the line? And maybe what we have today with all these things of consulting and the Kobelas, Noktwala, Izgupu, Izchito, all these weird things. Maybe these are just things that are modern developments. And maybe African spirituality in its original form maybe wasn't like this. So let's have a look at this video and then we'll give some thoughts towards the end.
Spirituality, we consult for communal things, basically. If you lived in a village of Bakamba 1,000 years ago, and you have this lion that just keeps attacking the village, and no matter what you do, you can't catch it, or all your girls, they turn 10 and then they have a sudden disease and they die. And then you're just like, okay, we have disturbed the balance of nature, because that's the fifth one we'll come to it. We've disturbed the balance of nature. So something is not in sync, something is not balancing. Then you consult collectively to find out what is wrong. But where the bastardization has come in, people want to consult for personal reasons. How can I become rich? How do I bewitch my husband to divorce them? We never, for those things, you fought your ancestors at your umsam or at your altar, you got the answers. Difference which I have alluded to. In spirituality, nature is in us and we are in nature.
There you have it, guys. That's Dr. Shabalala's take on this sort of understanding of African spirituality. So I want to first just begin that I partly agree with what she says. And you'll notice that not everyone who's teaching African spirituality these days actually agrees with each other. For an example, you've got the people like Osiam Kize who say you don't actually have to go through anyone to communicate to your ancestors. You can go to your own Msamo, you can speak to them there. You don't have to slaughter maybe via someone else. You can do all of that stuff by yourself. You don't actually need any individual or a gifted person to help you. But then in the same breath, someone else who's teaching African spirituality, like Dr. Khadebe, will say he's spiritually gifted as Imboni. And so he's somebody who can help Abantu that are sick, maybe people who are being bewitched. And maybe even some of our Sangomas hold to that particular school of thought in African spirituality, where you've got to go through the gifted individual. You've got to consult. And so basically she's saying, no, that is bastardization. Dr. Shabalala says, no, we actually never used to consult. What people would do if there was a major problem in the village, then they would all come together and then communicate to their ancestors. So what I'm actually finding more and more in my research is that if you look at the oldest tribes in Africa, if you look at, for an example, the Khoi and the San, you'll see that their spirituality is actually centered around nature. It's not centered around consulting. In fact, even there is a respect for the dead, but not in the sense that they can direct your life, like in the typical way that we know African spirituality. If you also look at the Maasai of Kenya, these people don't believe in the afterlife. They don't believe in ancestors at all, actually. And so this idea that speaking to the dead is some monolithic African way of practicing spirituality is also false. And perhaps this is where the problem is with the idea of African spirituality, is that that idea already assumes that all of us will believe the same thing. For as long as it's on the same continent, then obviously it must be the same. So even though she's trying to distance herself from that and calling it bastardization, but if you are still saying African spirituality, well, Izangoma, these are African words. They have African meanings. These are African practices. So by the mere fact of saying African spirituality, you are just choosing your own faction of the same thing, but actually taking away what may be seen as negative, and you just want to take what looks maybe more positive, and so you distance yourself from the consulting, the prosperity, which we always call out, by the way. So it's very important to say that she must first abandon that idea of African spirituality before she can make a case. Because if it's African spirituality, it just assumes that anything on the continent that is indigenous is now therefore a part of it. I think that if you look at the Bible, coming back to the idea of nature, the Bible has no issues with us taking care of nature. It encourages us to take care of nature. In fact, we're told in Genesis chapter 1, verse 26 and 7, that God placed the man in the garden. So we've been placed in the world, and it also tells us that we were meant to take care of it. So I want to first say that African spirituality, as she's saying it, the positive is that there is a good respect for nature, right? And the same that the Bible encourages us to actually take care of the nature, to work the land. That's what the Bible actually encourages us. But I think where the problem begins is where we begin to then attribute some kind of spiritual attributes to nature. And there's this concept of what we call animism in African spirituality. And animism is the belief that, there are actually attributes or essence that can be attributed to objects, natural elements like living creatures. So for an example, a tree can have some spirit that is inhabited that tree, and therefore people can go speak to it and seek guidance, perform rituals, to appease it. So people, even stones and rocks and mountains, certain mountains said to be maybe possessed by some spirits or ancestral spirits. So people then go and speak there. So there's also a danger then when we then attribute all these personal attributes, spiritual attributes to nature, when the Bible is clear on our side that God created these things and that actually we were meant to rule the fish and all these other things. They're under us. That's why you'll find that people in African spirituality have no problem kneeling to a chicken, right? And speaking to a chicken, assuming that now some person who's passed away is now in the chicken, and people are kneeling and begging the chicken, right? So for us, that means you've actually vacated your position as someone who's the ruler in the world, someone who was actually commissioned to have dominion, to take care of the world. And the Bible tells us that we've been made lower than the angels, but we've been made to rule, and we're greater than the creatures of the world. And that's another thing that we need to know with African spirituality, is that there's a principle of continuation. God and humanity and nature, this is basically in the principle of continuation. It's one thing. So in other words, I am one with nature, I'm one with God. I am God, God is nature, God is me, nature is me. I can, dead spirits can occupy nature. That's a principle. Whereas in the Bible, there's a clear distinction. This is God, he's outside of creation. This is creation, and it's different to humanity. Humanity has a different role to creation. So that's something that's very fundamental for us to understand, is that there's no principle of continuation in the Bible. There's actually a clear, you're a human, God is God, and nature is nature. Whereas in African spirituality, all of this is brought together. Now, the Bible is clear that we should not make any idols, any form of image, anything that can actually take God's place in our lives. So this then presents the problem for Dr. Khanyisile when she says we used to consult as a community. Let's say there's a lion that's now running wild, and we need to then come together to consult our ancestors to help us. Or, she would say, if there's some form of a sickness that's occurring very frequently, people would then come together. Now, on the biblical side, even though she's saying they never used to consult for prosperity, they did this. But on the biblical side, the question is, if you look at Isaiah chapter 8, verses 19 right to 23, it says, should not a people inquire of their God? Why consult the dead on behalf of the living? Now, the Bible is clear, obviously, that the dead know nothing. I think it's Ecclesiastes chapter 8 that says the dead know nothing. So what it actually tells us is that in African spirituality, there's a tendency to see God as this person who is not willing to engage in a relationship with people, right? He's cold in terms of his relationship. He allocates the relational side to creation. He allocates the relation side, to other people, to other spirits, to other even lesser gods. But he himself is actually not willing to engage us. He's not willing to hear us. He's too far to hear you, right? He doesn't want to engage you. He delegates that responsibility to someone else. But I think we contrast that to the God of the Bible, that he's not just willing to hear you, but he's also willing to come down to you. He's willing, though he's outside of creation, he's willing to actually take on the flesh and wear the flesh in order to come to us. So God is relational in the Christian side. He's always created us so that we would be with him, that we would be in a relationship with him. He wants to hear us. He wants to see us. But in African spirituality, God were disturbing him, were making so much noise for him. He wants to lock himself up in a very far away land, and just doesn't want to engage. So those are some of my observations with this thing, is that even though you're saying we used to consult privately, but still the idea that you can't actually consult and engage God directly, like, why did he then create us if he doesn't want to have a relationship with us? If he wants someone else to be the one that now we must go through, but we can never actually know this person that created us, the person that formed us and made us. Why can we not know him? Why can he not reveal himself? Why doesn't he want to show himself? Bishop Mabonga recently was saying he's looking for Jesus. Where is Jesus? Where is Jesus? We can ask the same question of the supreme being in African spirituality, to say, where is he? Why does he not want to have this relationship with people? Why does he delegate it to other people? This is Bisrat for Africa. These are just my thoughts on this video from Dr. Shabalala. Continue to like, to share, to subscribe, and we'll see you guys on the next video.